Right, so here we got my array of 8 scrapping basic bots, because all they need to do is scrap. And here we are at the sort of framework of my factory. It's not finished yet. Need to finish up together. The power plant, pair of fusions, just to get enough power. An elevator, which I don't really need, and they're kind of useless. So the workbench, and from the workbench this vacuum hopper will just start sucking stuff out, and that goes into this materials lift. Unfortunately, because the vacuum hopper has to go on the ground to be at the right level, its output is effectively on ground level, so I had to use the ground level belt, which of course doesn't work with the higher level elevated belts you need to go into the other components. So I use a lift to drop the stuff onto an elevated conveyor belt. I'm using a couple of walls here which clip slightly into warehouse walls, which clip slightly into the elevator, which is quite nice, because then they can use them as baffles, because items tend to bounce when they drop from a height and often bounce off the elevator. But this contains any bouncing and nicely keeps them on the conveyor belt. Move past here. I'll get to this hopper in a bit, and then through a first component sorter, and anything that goes past that component sorter will come into this ammunition plant builder, which will then feed this conveyor storage. And I'll talk about this vacuum hopper, the other vacuum hoppers attached to the things in a moment. Then a second sorter will feed this armor forge, and a third component sorter will feed this weapon forge. And then the output from that third, anything that doesn't pass through, that doesn't get positively identified by component sorter, comes into this conveyor belt lift, and along this belt to this storage here, conveyor storage here. So it's, everything gets returned to here. And there's a vacuum hopper attached to this, which goes into this regular hopper, which again returns back to the main belt, which I'll just sort of come down here. So that hopper just now drops again with a pair of baffle walls, just to stop anything from bouncing off the conveyor belt, because it really has a nasty habit of doing that. Then, because builders scrap junk items, you might find that if in an ammunition plant, for example, you feed lead into it, you might say, "Oh, I've sorted some pencils into this ammunition plant," but wood isn't used for ammunition, so you might find some wood building up in the plant. So the idea of this vacuum hopper and the other two vacuum hoppers attached to my builders is that I'll switch them on separately, and they'll suck out any of the overflow materials or any of the unused materials, and again they join this via section of lifts and into a hopper. And I just fell off because my this section isn't OSHA compliant yet with railings and so on, and they get sort of dropped into this hopper and then again dropped onto the conveyor belt of the materials return system into this return conveyor storage, where they can be sucked out again and return back to the flow of materials. So I haven't laid all of the electrical work yet. This is the start of it. I'm going to have 4 separate power buses. My sheet of notes is around here somewhere, or not. Or maybe it's on the floor because I'm an idiot. And I've got, you know, I've got, yeah, there we go. I've got, so the idea is I'm going to have the first power bus will feed sort of the main belt and the component sorters and the builders. That's just to sort of get the stuff moving. I'll have a second switch just to power the main extracting vacuum hopper, the main one which feeds off the workbench. I'll have a third one which will power these return vacuum hoppers from return ones from the builders, and then I'm going to have a fourth which will power the extraction from the sort of recycled storage. And then I built a nice little sort of using warehouse sort of glass house components. Just a nice little control room with the power coming in from the fusion plants, going into a terminal, and then some conduit which will feed these switches, and each switch will correspond to the 4 buses I've discussed. So there you go. I've not finished the build yet, but and I've still got a decent amount of I'm about 60-70% used the build space in Starlight Drive-In, so I should have enough to put lay the conduit and then put the walls up. So there we have it.